Right. Hi everyone. Welcome to our first talk in our Tech Talk series brought to you by the Technology Shift Initiative of 99X Technology. A bit about myself, I'm Rajika Viratna and I'm a trainee software engineer at 99X Technology. Alright, so most of my work is based on GitHub, so I have actually contributed to many popular repositories such as Facebook's React repository and Google's Polymer repository. And alright, now today we are going to dive into ReactJS. We'll see what ReactJS is and how we can harness the power of ReactJS. And also we'll go through a few facts on React internals. And I'll be giving a brief introduction to Flux architecture, how we can use Flux with ReactJS and how we can benefit from the one-directional data flow. And also I'll be doing a demo on extending an application which has been already created with React and Flux. And at the end I'll be doing a comparison between Angular 1 and ReactJS. Alright, now what's ReactJS? ReactJS is a JavaScript library which can be used to create user interfaces, and it's an open source library. So if you follow this link, you can go to the official GitHub repository, and there's one word you should notice especially, and that's library, because most of the developers in the community confuse ReactJS with many frameworks such as AngularJS and Ember.js, but this shouldn't happen because most ReactJS at its core, it's just a library, it's not a framework. Alright, now out of the box, React is component based, so you can create custom components with ReactJS, and React follows the learn once and write anywhere rule. And React also has this library called React Native. It's a separate library. You can code iOS and more Android applications with React Native. So React follows the rule of learn once and write anywhere. And also React components are declarative, so we can actually use this declarative syntax and we can declare our components with ReactJS. Now we'll see what this declarative syntax is once you're proceeding through this presentation. Alright, now ReactJS is loosely coupled because of the component nature of ReactJS. And out of the box there are no routing solutions for ReactJS now. And then if we consider about Ajax, there's no solution for React when you are considering the application structures. Now when you are considering React as a library, if you want to use a routing solution, we can grab an elegant solution which is called the React router. So we can just plug it to our React projects and we can use React router with our React projects. And also when we are considering Ajax support, if you want to use the GitHub's fetch API, we can use it with our React projects. Or if you are a hardcore jQuery fan, there's no problem, you can use jQuery with our React projects. Alright, now when we are considering all these facts together, we can say that React is unopinionated because React actually gives the freedom for developers to select a unique and an elegant solution for our problems. So we can say that React is unopinionated. Alright, now this is not the case with ReactJS because React is not a framework, because React is a library, so we don't have to learn so many things when you are learning ReactJS. Alright, now in the case of MVC, the model view control architecture, React actually belongs to the view layer. But if you consider a framework like Angular or Ember, it actually covers all these components, the model, view and the controller. But in the case of ReactJS, React only focuses on one thing, that's the view layer. Alright, like I said, React is using components. We can declare custom components with ReactJS, and it's using a declarative syntax, and that's what we call JSX. Now JSX stands for JavaScript XML syntax. Now we will see what this JSX and JSX is and how we can use JSX within our applications when we are doing the demonstration. And when you are using components with React, the UI description and the UI logic are tightly coupled. Now we are using vanilla JavaScript to declare our UI logic, and for our UI description we are using the JSX. And once we are using components in ReactJS, we can get more cohesive and reusable components out of ReactJS. And also with ReactJS, we have our own props and states for each and every component. And in ReactJS, we call properties props. And also with ReactJS, like I said, we can just use plain JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript. And another important point to be noticed is that we can use ES6 or the ES 2015 with React components. Now this is an important point, because we can keep up with the community, because ES6 is the latest version of JavaScript. So when we are considering all these facts, we can actually say that React has a smooth learning curve, because if a developer knows JavaScript to a certain extent, that means that developer knows React to a certain extent already. Alright, now thinking in React. Now React uses this feature called one-way data binding. Unlike in Angular's two-way data binding, React has one-way data binding. Now this is how we actually declare a component with the create class factory, and we have this React global object from our React library. And this is so we have passed a JavaScript object here, and we have the key value pairs, and we have this JSX. So we'll go through JSX more when we are doing the demonstration. Now for now, you can see that for this onChange event, I have passed this handle change, and this is my custom method. So for each event that gets fired, I am firing this handle change event. So you can see that data passes only in a single direction. Now if this is confusing for you, I'll demonstrate it with this with a diagram. Now this is two-way data binding actually, and this is one-way data binding. So this is the Angular's case. So we have two vouchers, and this is our input field, and this is our variable. So we have two vouchers. So you can see that data passes in two-way. But in the case of ReactJS, we have an event, and that event actually fires the data flow is grabbed from the text box, and that data flow is going to our variable, and there's a voucher here, and you can see that the data flows in a single direction. So we can say that this is one-way data binding. Alright, so React is so popular in the community right now, and there's a special reason why React is so popular. React executes so fast, especially when it's doing DOM manipulation. So there's a magic behind React.js, and that magic is the virtual DOM. The virtual DOM is a large JavaScript object which represents the real DOM. So we can say that it's an abstraction of the real DOM. Now, in order to understand how the virtual DOM works, I'll take an example. So let's say we have a React application, and we are serving a simple page, and that page has a header tag with a text and a button with a handle click event, and with that click event I'm changing my header tag text. So I'm representing it with my red bubble here. So when the text changes, the virtual DOM, the React's virtual DOM actually detects that change, and it does a whole re-render of the virtual DOM. And once that happens, React actually compares the virtual DOM and the real DOM, and if there are any changes, so in this case we have a change, the red dot and the green dot. So once that happens, it actually patches from the virtual DOM to the real DOM. So this actually happens in milliseconds. So React uses a special algorithm called the diff algorithm. So this actually happens in milliseconds. So the React is so fast in DOM manipulation, and that's why developers love React.js. Alright, now in the case of MVC, so we are using MVC in Angular projects, and when you are scaling our Angular projects or when you are using MVC with our front-end applications, we can see that we can get cascading updates. So here we have the model controller and the template. So this represents the view layer, and from the controller it can actually trigger a change in the model, but that model can also trigger a change in another model. So this can happen infinitely. So it can create an infinite loop. So this creates a problem, the cascading update. So this reduces the scalability, maintainability, and performance in our application. So instead of using MVC, there's another elegant solution. That's the Flux architecture. Now Flux is an architecture which can be used to create client-side applications. Now in Flux, it embraces the one-directional data flow. In Flux, we have four components: the action, the dispatcher, and the store, and the view layer. Now usually with Flux we are using React components, but even if you are using any other library you can use, because when you are using React components, we can get the much more reactive UIs out of React.js. Alright, so let's go for our demo. So if you're following this live stream, and if you want to actually follow with me, you can go to this GitHub repository and grab this repository so that you can follow this tutorial. Alright, now I have this Flux application, and this is a simple application that I have created in order to grab data out of GitHub, and this is the client side code. So I have my 4 components in Flux.js: the actions, components, and the dispatcher and the store. And I'm using constants to identify unique actions that are being dispatched. So if we go to our presentation here, so you can see that the data flows in a single direction. Now from the view layer, the data goes to the action layer, and from the action it gets to the dispatcher, and the dispatcher actually tells the stores that something has happened, an action has been dispatched, and if the stores are interested in those actions, actually they can update themselves. So once they update themselves, since React is reactive, they can use these listeners within the stores and update their views. So actually more reactive UIs can be built with this Flux architecture. So let's go back to our demonstration, and I'll go to my repository here and I'll run my application. Alright, now it's running. We'll see how it looks. Alright, now in order to run this, I need to actually complete my application. So let's begin with adding our feature. Now we have our action, components, and dispatch and store. Since we are focusing on React, we will focus on our React components now. If we have these React components in this each and every folder, so we are interested in this folder. Now we have our aux container, so I'm using my aux container as my parent component. Now I'll grab my code snippet from here and I'll give here, and I have another component called the aux component, and it's my child component, and it's already been here. And you can see according to my comments, I'm getting my React library, I'm grabbing my library and I'm declaring my component here, and I'm using it as my child component. And within this child component, I'm accessing my props with this dot props and the prop name. So this is how we access props. And within our parent component, I'm using lifecycle methods. So you can refer lifecycle methods in the React documentation. So they have really good documentation. So within these lifecycle methods, I'm loading my resources. So I'm adding a listener for my store so that I can change my UI whenever the store changes, and I'm grabbing my username from the store again, and I'm getting my resources from my backend with a Node API. It's the simple API, so you can refer to it with my GitHub repository, and I'm passing it to it. Now in this part, this is what we call JSX. Now we have the state, so we are accessing state with this dot state, and we have this aux, which is an array. So once we use this get initial state, we should actually return something. Even if it's empty, we should return. So we are returning an empty array called aux. Now that's the initial state, but when you are going to this component mount stage, it actually loads some resources and it's filling this array, and we can access that array with this state because that array belongs to this state, and we can access it and we can loop it. And once we are looping, that means we are looping the children component. Now I can import my child component with this import statement. So I am using ES6 syntax here. So I am looping my data within my array, and I am giving out my child component. So I am passing each and every prop, so the name, avatar, and URL. So you can see that I am accessing the properties within this child component using these names: URL, avatar, image, and name. Alright, now this is our application. So this is how we use React components within our application. So let's see how this application looks once we build our application. Alright, so I'm using Webpack. So if you want to use any other bundler like Browserify, you can use it, but the React community is more biased toward Webpack. But you can use any bundler like Browserify. Browserify is a really good bundler. But the Webpack bundler has so many features, so many options. That's going to take more time to build. So we'll proceed with our presentation. Alright, now that's how we use ReactJS with Flux architecture, and that's how we use one direction data flow. So you can see that the data flows in a single direction. Alright, now Angular versus ReactJS. So let's get into our comparison between Angular and ReactJS. Alright, now this is Go. So does it make sense comparing a framework with a library? Actually it doesn't in a certain way, but actually it does in a certain another way. But when you take Angular versus React, the Angular is like more like a assembled computer. It's already assembled. But when you are taking React, it's like purchasing a computer with by selecting each and every part. So that's how we can represent ReactJS. Alright, so let's get into our comparison between AngularJS and React. Now, with ReactJS, we have a steep learning curve, a more smooth learning curve actually. Because if a developer knows JavaScript to a certain extent, that means that developer knows ReactJS up to a certain extent. And if you compare Angular has a steep learning curve, because when you take Angular, that has so many components. Like if you want to learn Angular, there are so many things that we want to learn to get started with AngularJS. So for an example, we'll need to know what directives are, we'll need to know how controllers and our services are getting declared within our AngularJS application. So Angular has a steep learning curve, and in AngularJS they use the regular DOM, so the DOM manipulations are really slow in AngularJS compared to virtual DOM in ReactJS. So with virtual DOM there are so many fast DOM manipulations happening behind the scenes. So React is using the virtual DOM. And in AngularJS we have two-way data binding, but in ReactJS, like I said earlier, we have one-way data binding. Alright, now when you are using two-way data binding, like I said, when we are using MVC, and also there can be many cascading updates, and when you are scaling our application there can be problems. But when you are using one-way data binding with one directional data flow, actually we can scale our application by keeping our performance in a smooth manner. Alright, when you are considering server-side rendering, now server-side rendering is an important point when you are considering single-page applications. Now in AngularJS there's no unique solution out there if we consider server-side rendering, but with ReactJS as a library supports server-side rendering, so the initial page load time can be increased with ReactJS. Alright, so that's what we have here. So what's next? So if you are going to dig more into ReactJS, you can do unit testing with a library called JS. So if you follow this link, you can go to the official official website. And next we have the React Dev Tools. So React Dev Tools are so useful when you are debugging our React applications. Now you can grab React Dev Tools as a Chrome extension, or either you can, if you are a Firefox user, you can add it with a Firefox add-on. Now it will be soon available as a standalone application. And next we have Redux. Now Redux is a very good library which has evolved from the idea of Flux. Now Redux uses the functional programming concepts now, and Redux is actually very good in state containment. So if you are digging more into ReactJS, you should actually check Redux. And if you can dig more into server-side rendering, that would be better, because we can actually increase our performance with our React applications. Alright, so that's what we have for you guys today. Now make sure to tune in for our next tech talk, which will be based on machine learning. Alright, thank you for tuning in.